in contrary, is very important for the sustainability of civil society in the Western Balkans. So the third panel will focus on funding futures, navigating donor shifts, and building sustainability. The panel will be moderated by my colleague, Clotilda Costa. She is Director of Programs at Partners Albania, covering the portfolios of the enabling environment for civil society organizations, entrepreneurship, and social innovation. Since 2025, she is also chair of the board of the Balkan Civil Society Development Network. Claudia, the floor is yours for the third panel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ariola, for the presentation. Hello, everybody. I know that this is a bit difficult to start after lunch, but I promise you that we will have a very interesting speakers and discussions in this panel, and we will try to keep the time within the limits that we have. So please, all the speakers, I would like to invite you to the podium. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this important conference for the region. I'd like to start immediately with the presentation of our speakers. I have the pleasure to moderate this session of the conference. As it was said, the last but not the least important one. It is my pleasure to introduce you Ms. Enrica Chiosa, which is the head of sector for civil society, social inclusion, and human capital development at the Directorate General for Enlargement and Eastern Neighborhood, or as it is known, DG ENEST, in the European Commission. Ms. Chiosa works on policy design and funding programs that support civil society, that strengthens social inclusion, and invests in human capital across EU neighboring countries. Thank you, Ms. Chiosa. Next, we have Ms. Lisa Kurman. Ms. Kurman is a program specialist in the Europe Department of the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, or SIDA, which is focusing on the Western Balkans and Turkey. She works on development cooperation strategies, partnerships, and projects implementation to promote sustainable development and democratic governance. Welcome and thank you. Okay. Okay, I take a deep breath here to do the right pronunciation. We have Mr. Miodrag Milosavljevic. Thank you. Deputy Director for the Western Balkans at the Open Society Foundation based in Belgrade. He has a long-standing experience in civil society, working on democratic reforms, citizen participation, and institutional oversight, with a focus on democratic governance, just green transition, digital rights, and anti-corruption. Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Risena Jaya, the Chief Administrator of the Agency for the Administration of Seized and Confiscated Assets in Albania. Ms. Jaya is responsible for the operational oversight and administration of assets seized and confiscated from organized crime and anti-corruption. She brings a long experience actually in public administration and institutional management, with a special focus on transparency, accountability, and strengthening the rule of law. Thank you, Ms. Jaya. And last but no, we have also we have two last, Mr. Dren Puka. Dren is the executive director of the Kosovo Civil Society Foundation. Dren brings 20 years of experience in research, advocacy, and the development of participatory public policies, being with Kosovo Civil Society Foundation for over a decade. Dren is dedicated to advancing civil society, fostering inclusive governance across Kosovo, but also in the region, and building constructive cooperation between institutions, donors, and civic actors. Dren is also a board member of the Balkan Civil Society Development Network. And we have online with us Mr. Jonut Sibyan. Hello, Jonut.
Hello, hello from Brussels. Yes, I hear you perfectly.
Thank you for joining us. Jonut is the executive director of the Civil Society Development Foundation in Romania. Also a member of the Balkan Civil Society Development Network. Jonut leads the efforts in capacity building, advocacy, and grant making to strengthen civil society. Jonut is also a member of the European Economic and Social Committee, contributing to EU policy dialogue on civil society and governance. Thank you, Jonut. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. So I would like to start the discussions with Ms. Kjosa. Ms. Kjosa, we have also discussed it in the previous panels that now in this situation, the EU remains the larger donor in the region, and through the DGNS, it plays a central role in shaping the civil society support, social inclusion, but also the human capital development. So considering that, I would like to ask you from the European Commission perspective, what you see as the most immediate, let's say, priorities for civil society support in the region, and how is the DGNS adapting its strategy and approach of support in this situation when we are facing with the shrinking civic space, shifting donor priorities, sometimes even exiting donors from the region, and also in a situation when we are facing an increasingly hostile public narratives against civil society and liberal values.
Can you? Yes, okay, found. So thank you very much for offering to the European Commission the opportunity to touch upon such a critical aspects, because we have seen so the first thing that we do in the European Commission, and this we have been doing since a number of years, is to monitor and assess the impact that our funds, because as you said, we are the major donors. Major donor, it implies that in the 7-year period, 2021-2027, we have allocated from the instrument for pre-accession assistance in Western Balkans plus Turkey about €500 million in grants, okay, implemented in order to support the civil society organizations, but also the media program, because it's quite important to ensure that the narrative is pluralist, so the media are pluralist, and that there is a certain freedom in expression. As far as related, so money is there, but with the money is not enough. Therefore, I said we are monitoring what we are, where we are investing, and the evolution of in the countries of the civil society organizations. And to do that, in 2021, we endorsed what we call guidelines, because of course we are supporting the let's say 7 economies, Western Balkans plus Turkey, in order to advance. So the reason why we put so much money in order to advance on the enlargement process. Okay, but the enlargement process, we also need so there are a number of chapters, there are a number of clusters, but civil society is cutting across. So we need a vibrant civil society in order to ensure democracy. But this, again, it's quite difficult to making operating on the ground. Therefore, these guidelines identify 3 major areas of investments, so to channel the investment. The first one is to ensure a conducive environment for civil society, so to make sure that the legislation is there so that the civil society can operate. The second one is to strengthen the partnership between CSO and public institutions at a different levels, so from the municipal up to the central government. And the third one is to reinforce the capacity of the civil society in order to carry out different activities, in order to develop the expertise of the civil society that is very much needed, in particular now that we are, all the countries have, so that we can use the civil society in order to monitor the implementation, for example, of the reform agenda, the growth plan, but also to monitor the advancement or not in terms of enlargement and in all the sectors of the enlargement. So we need a civil society that is more expert in certain areas, not just in general on, that is very much needed, on what we call fundamentals, so to advance on the democracy and to ensure that there are democratic processes. So we are channeling the funds into these major areas, and we monitor, okay? The monitoring, the results of the monitoring, this is public. All of you can access this assessment. That is, the latest one was published in July. We do it through TAXO, that most of you may know. This is the technical assistance on civil society organization that is helping us and supporting us. And the conclusions, not the conclusion, the assessment is quite negative. Meaning we have a lot of money. We have these 3 major pillars that we address in our investments in support of civil society organizations. Unfortunately, in certain countries, or in certain economies, the conducive civil society, the environment for civil society is not any longer what was 2 years ago. So this year report is very interesting because it showed the evolution over 3 years. Over 3 years, the situation has clearly worsened. I would say all over the region. Let's say that the conducive environment, it's still, unfortunately, we are not there. And in certain cases and in certain it was there, now it is not there any longer. This also, as soon as you have a civic environment that is shrinking, so civic space that is shrinking, it brings also to limited discussions and limited dialogue with the public administration. Maybe you can have good dialogues at a local level, municipal level. This is happening. We are funding in collaboration with UNDP a quite good project that is Reload, but these are relations, civil society and municipal municipalities. So this is much easier. But when you go and escalate to the central governments, this can be quite, and has proved to be very, very challenging. I have to say here that between what is defined as public institution, I would put also the European Commission. And we engage with the civil society organizations, but we see that in the region, not everybody is, so the dialogue with the civil society and the European Commission is not as fluid, or let's say that also the way in which we have changed the dialogue with the countries, so also putting more conditionality to release of money against achievement of reforms entails that also we need some monitoring of certain areas that entails certain civil society organizations specialized in these areas. For example, just to give you an example, transport, digital, energy, it's very difficult to find a civil society organization that have this expertise. So let's say that the dialogue with us in some cases is limited to certain areas, and the dialogue with the countries at the national level is not as it was used to be, or as it would be expected to become now, after so many years of supporting civil society organization. Also, this links to the capacity. Civil society organization, it's very difficult to have sustainable civil society organization, and this has been so coming back to your last, to the response to. Also to what has happened at the beginning of the year, when at a certain point the Americans left the Balkans, so, I mean, left the external aid, so left the Balkans. And it is true that, well, okay, we did an analysis, and we sort of identified also with the help of the colleagues that work in the different countries, so with the EU delegation, we tried to tap in certain areas where this had left quite a lot of vacuum. I have to say that we were asked very recently, last week, to do, so to catch up and to see what has been, what we have done, and what has been the repercussion. And with the exception of Kosovo, that has suffered quite a lot from the USAID, let's say, freeze, we have the rest of the economies, they have suffered quite a lot in terms of media, media pluralism. And in this case, we have been let's say, relied on EED, that is the European Endowment for Democracy, in order to avoid to enter into tragic situations. When I say tragic, it is because these funds are used in order to tap and to help journalists that which lives is a threat, and that they were finding themselves in a very dramatic situation. So this is what I have to say. So meaning that the money is out there. The situation, we are perfectly aware that the situation is not rosy at all. Just one last, so because this is more at operational level, what we have seen, etc. So the European Commission is still adamant to support, to continue supporting the civil society organizations. So it's very important, and our commissioner, so I always finish with this, well, I was sitting with you recently in another panel, and there is a sort of institutional, let's say, statement that comes from our commissioner, and it is that the accession negotiation demands a collective effort from the entire society. So civil society organizations represent the society, and civil society organizations are very important in order to advance on the enlargement process. What does it mean concretely? That we will not stop funding the civil society organization. On the contrary, there is also, and this is a real novelty, that the European Commission, not the DG NS, so the DG responsible for the enlargement, but DG Justice has launched an internal process in order to publish a strategy in support of civil society organization within the European Union, so in the EU27, because let's be frank, it's not only to blame the situation in outside Europe. There are also some cases in which civil society organization, unfortunately, in the EU member states are struggling. Civic space is not what it was, in particular in certain countries. Therefore, there will be a strategy that is going to be adopted by the college by the end of the year. And there was an open call for comments, etc., that I hope that many of you have replied, because we tried to have the Western Balkans in particular reflected, the Western Balkan needs reflected in the objective of the strategy. So, as a conclusion, we will keep, we are reinforcing the way in which the civil society within the EU and outside the EU is supported, but still there is quite a lot to do.
Yes, there is actually quite a lot to do from all stakeholders, I suppose, to create this that you mentioned, the fully enabling environment for civil society operations with support from all stakeholders, and especially from the EU in this, especially in this integration process that all of the countries of the Western Balkans are going through. So you raised very important issues, and I think probably we will have interventions and questions from the audience. So I am continuing with the other speakers, and then we will have another round of interventions and questions for each of you. So, Ms. Kuman, SIDA is one of the few bilateral donors that have still continued its support and is committed to continue the support to civil society in the region, and that has, let's say, a different approach through building long partnerships with civil society organization, through also core and institutional support for civil society, and also through flexibility in funding. So taking into consideration this approach that SIDA has followed through these years, which has been vital for the organizational sustainability and also resilience of the organizations. Now with this situation, giving this recent shifts in donor presence, my question to you would be, how do you see the role of civil society evolving, and how SIDA is adapting its strategy to support the civil society in the Western Balkan region?
Thank you, and thank you also to the organizers of this very interesting and important conference. Well, yes, as you say, SIDA has been providing support to the Western Balkan region for quite some time, and civil society support has been included in that. We are concerned, as everybody else, of the recent events during the past years, the shrinking space, but also the USAID withdrawal. I think that neither EU nor SIDA can sort of fill those shoes. But we will continue. I think that, I mean, even though the Swedish government will adopt a new strategy for the region, we have not yet seen it, but we believe that civil society will still be there, even with the new government saying that emphasizing more the trade and development. They are still emphasizing the role of civil society to protect civic space, to build the capacity of civil society, in all its diversity to build a broad base of civil society organizations that receive support. We will not be able to support everyone, that is for sure. And as you say, of course, some will not receive funds. But the approach has been and will continue to be, I believe, that core support or flexible funds is somehow the first option to explore and assess whether that is possible for SIDA to provide to civil society organizations. And we see that this has been a very effective way of providing support, and that it provides the civil society organizations to build their own agency, to build resilience, as you say, and also to really work on their own strategic direction, to connect with their constituencies and to build that kind of downward accountability, which is very important for resilience. But I think also, Anja, you mentioned earlier in your intervention what to do now in this situation. What are the sort of the options? And I think that some of the things you mentioned as networking between civil society organizations within one country, within the Western Balkan region, but also, as you have shown in this conference, to reach out to EU-based organizations as well, to nurture those kinds of networks and exchange of experiences and knowledge and strategies. I think that is really important. And also this issue of sort of solidarity with the citizens or with the constituencies, just to nurture those kinds of relationships, that creates trust as well. Because civil society is to different extents representing the citizens and the people. And I think this is also what SIDA would like to continue to support, this kind of idea of the civil society and the role of the civil society in a democratic setting. And then we will see exactly what the available funding will be. There are many challenges, but I think we'll have to keep the focus on the core issues of the civil society, the core role, to support civil society in its own right to continue to play its role in the democratic society. And just to mention that SIDA is also, the Swedish development cooperation policies are currently changing. There is a new global strategy for civil society, which is also changing the way how SIDA are distributing funds on that global level, which will now be more open towards civil society organizations in partner countries to apply for funding. Previously, this envelope or this strategy was only directed to Swedish civil society organizations forwarding funds to other organizations and partners in various countries. And now the Swedish government wants to have fewer sub-granting levels and more transparency in how funds are being distributed, how partners are being chosen. So there will be more and more, I think, recurrent calls for proposals. This is very new for SIDA to work in this way. So we'll have to come back exactly how we will continue to work on this. But I think just to let you know that you said that SIDA has had this approach, and yes, I think I can confirm that we will continue with this kind of core support flexible funds approach, but we will also have this call for proposals approach. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Kuman, for confirming, let's say, the commitment of civil towards support of civil society, and we are looking forward to the new strategy and the ways and modalities of cooperation and supporting civil society in the region. I'd like to continue with you, Dren. Going now to another dimension of funding, which is support through public funding. Kosovo in the region is considered, if I may say so, as the best practice in establishing a public funding mechanisms that is working. I'm not saying that it is excellent, because I'm sure that there are gaps, there are challenges and needs for improvements, but still it's a mechanism that I know it's built with cooperation with civil society, and KCSF has been one of the main actors contributing to that. So could you please share with us in this conference what progress has been made in institutionalizing this kind of support and mechanism that you have established, and of course what are the challenges that remains to ensure that these public funding are distributed fairly, are distributed in a way that they respond to the needs of civil society and contribute to independent civic engagement, which are some of the key issues with which we are faced in the region with, when it comes to public funding distribution.
Thank you, Claudia. And yeah, I like the way you you frame the question, the tone that you framed. And I want to start with this, that it is far from being an ideal or to be proud of a system that we have. However, here in the upcoming minutes, I will walk you through what we went through and how it all started in trying to make public funding more accessible and transparent since 2015. That was the time when we would hear figures like 20 million euros of funding from public funds to civil society, and no one would know who is getting those funds. 20 million euros is huge. Now, had we have 20 millions to manage and distribute them as grants, I'm pretty sure that we would cover the entire civil society organizations that work in the areas of democracy, rule of law, supporting different communities. Then we try to understand what's happening, like who is getting what and what they're doing. That was quite difficult to get the information because it was so fragmented. All ministries at the central level and the local governments would have their own ways and approaches into dispersing grants, with almost no publicly available or clear procedures on how you can get grants. For example, one secretary of a ministry could sign a contract of up to 10,000 euros a grant. That would be that no one would know how is the procedure that you can get that grant. So we started in collecting information mostly from the Ministry of Finance. Then we realized that in that 20 millions, a good portion of it goes to funeral services that the state provides for its citizens. Another good portion of it goes to sports clubs and federations who are registered as NGOs, but still they have a completely different nature of work and scope of work, so they need to be treated differently. When we would subtract all these categories, we would find out that it is actually from 5 to 8 millions of euros of grants, which is quite substantial. Then we realized that it's time to stop this, in a way, financial bleeding that we would call back then. So as civil society, we came up with this unified approach that was mentioned before. So sometimes unified approach is really matters. It was supported also by the expertise from EPA funding from the EU. And we developed this regulation that now we have on public funding for CSOs. Currently, the positive parts of what has been working is that now all all ministries and local governments have to have public calls if they want to support civil society. So now that's mandatory and by regulation. The grants have to be assessed by joint evaluation commissions, where a representative of civil society needs to be part of that commission. All institutions have to plan the granting programs beforehand with a consultation by consulting civil society and other stakeholders, and so on and so forth. And there is an online platform on public funding where all contracts have to be published, name of the organization, project, and what was the aim of that project. On the challenges and what is not working well, we see that grant making is not something that everyone can do. Grant making requires quite advanced systems and knowledge of knowing how to do it. It requires a well understanding of civil society. And this varies quite a lot. A good example here in the last 3 years is the Ministry of Culture, who was led by a previous civil society member. And why I'm mentioning is that it really means a lot for the ones who are leading the institution to have a good understanding of civil society. They further improved their internal procedures for granting, and they broke this idea of we cannot give grants with public funding that are more than 1 year. Now we have long-term, up to 3 years funds from Ministry of Culture. That is the only case so far. As for other institutions and municipalities, many issues still are present. The evaluation bodies barely do the work in a proper way. We have around 1,500 beneficiaries of the grants, but the average grant contract is around 6,000 euros. Now you can imagine what could be done with 6,000 euros of a project, and the amounts they differ from year to year, but around 15 millions per year in both levels. Now we are at that position where we know what is being funded and by whom and who is getting funds, but the stigma for public funding is still there. The well-established and prestigious organizations wouldn't even apply for public funding because of the system not working well so far, because of being quite scrutinized by mostly media whenever someone would get funding from public institutions, blamed, sometimes rightly so, but most of the times in an exaggerated manner that would put in question the entire reputation of the organization, and not many would want them to go through that public scrutiny. In order for this process to improve, we have proposed for many years now, and it has been in the government's agenda for 3 years, the amendment of the existing regulation, because now we have to think of ways on how public funding could contribute to the sustainable development of civil society. Public funding to be seen as a tool for democracy strengthening in the country, rather than dispersing grants to as many civil society organizations as possible. And this seems to be quite a difficult and complex process. Few of the things that we propose that government needs to have in mind is that acknowledge the fact that not all institutions could be grant givers. Either have an independent or specialized body that deals with grant giving, or work together with civil society organizations into building these joint bodies and managing public funding for civil society together. Invest continuously into capacity building of public officials, especially into understanding the role and different perspectives and functions that civil society organizations have. And throughout the process, build the partnership and the trust among citizens that public funding is being used for a public good and for the strengthening of democracy, in essence, for the sustainable development of the country. We're yet to reach at this point, and this momentum right now is actually crucial to initiate this dialogue with the government, not only us in Kosovo, but in the entire region, with the USAID, Southern Exit, and other donors shifting priorities, reduced funding. We have to think of our governments have to think of their countries and democracy to sustain themselves with the support of other donors as well. But it has to start now because it doesn't seem to be an easy process that whenever other donors will also further reduce funding, then that's the time to start thinking about it. And to conclude, I would really wish that our governments, but not only, also other donors, would benefit and use the approach that SIDA has been applying for many years into acknowledging the difficulty and the complexity of supporting civil society in the long term, and understanding that that is a process that requires consistent support and trust among the donor, be that government or international donor, and eventually expect development and impact.
Thank you, Jem, for sharing your experience with us, and good luck with the continuous efforts to continually improve the process and the mechanisms, and to ensure that the civil society organization have the needed support, even from the state, from public institutions, because the funding at the end goes to meet the needs of the final beneficiaries of the civil society organization, which are the individuals and groups in need of the services that the organizations are providing. We will move to another sector, to the private support, to the private foundations. Miodrag, please allow me to call you by name. Open Society Foundation is one of the largest and the few private foundations actually working in the region, providing for a long time now support to civil society, democracy, and human rights and rule of law. So how is the foundation in the Western Balkans supporting this long-term resilience in the region, and your strategy to maintain the civic engagement and advocacy, which are very important components of the work that the civil society are playing in our respective countries? Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Clotilda, for practicing the pronunciation as well. But you can call me Miki, everyone does, except my mother, so you can use a nickname. Yes, it's a pleasure being here and speaking at this conference. Thank you for the invitation, both you, Biljana, and the teams. It's really an important one, and when I see also the audience, it even raises the importance. And when I'm faced with this type of audience, I usually have the feeling that I have to deliver like Obama-style speech with a strong "yes, we can" attitude, which is something that I can't offer at this point. And not only at this point, also after the experience I had a couple of months ago at the Point conference in Sarajevo, when I was speaking on a similar topic. After my speech, I was accused of spreading toxic optimism. So since then, I'm more conservative in my assessments, and I'll be more conservative this time in the assessment of the situation. But what I'm going to do in my hopefully 5 minutes, it will be like the assessment of the situation from the point of view of the Open Society Foundation's Western Balkans, and also provide some of the experiences that we do have from also our own adjustment to the new circumstances. So basically, that's it. I skip most of my notes actually, because we've heard a lot about the context, about the situation, but I liked very much the quote that I've heard last week in Vienna when we had a connector forum. This is a section of Philea. Some of you who have been participating in Philea, it's a safe space where we don't quote each other from Philea, but someone said, you know, this is a virtue of something like this. So this is a virtue of turning shit into fertilizer. So basically this is our job now, because the situation is grim. We can't say that situation is good. Situation is that environment is enabling for the civil society organization, nothing like that, but not only for the civil society organizations, also for the donor community as well, not only in the region but globally. So my part of the assessment will start from the bilateral donors and the shock wave that we had with USAID, and I won't go into details. You all know about that, but I can tell you that on a day when these funds were cut, actually when the cut of funds were announced, the inboxes of my inbox and the inboxes of my colleagues at the Open Society Foundations exploded with requests by organizations to check if we can step in and support their programs, their projects, their organizations, their people, which is the most valuable resource that our organizations have. We also did a internal calculation as well, and also consulted with many of you in this room to see what is the scale of damage that is emerging, and we came across like hundreds of millions of US dollars, which is I'm afraid no one can compensate for that. So basically we have to, in the coming period, we will have to deal and to work with what we already have, and to make more out of this of what we have, and to pull our resources together. It's not much brighter situation with private funders as well, private donors. Most of the private donors, even though Open Society Foundations in Western Balkans is the biggest, I think, private donor in the Western Balkans, but also others are struggling, because there is what we see in Europe, prevalent narrative that Europe is in war. And then when you are in times of war, you do not like dedicate or increase funding for participation and democratization, but rather to buy armored vehicles and other stuff. And I'm not saying that private funders do that, but they largely depend on the situation in businesses that support them usually, and they largely also depend on the political situation in their countries. And one final feature that we didn't have before, which is new to our context, is that private funders are now struggling with the democratic decline in their own countries. And one of the colleagues told us, like, if someone told me 15 years ago that the colleague is from Western European country, that my foundation will invest in like promoting democratic values in my country, 15 years ago, I would laugh out loudly, But 15 years fast forward, we are seeing that increasingly private foundations, private donors from the EU are also investing in their direct neighborhoods and not really having Western Balkans on top of their minds as well. So this is something that we didn't have before, and we will have to struggle with that as well. We have domestic funding, public funding in our countries as well. But I think someone mentioned me, I think it was Anya in the first panel, that it's highly politicized in most of the context, and that we can't rely much on that. And there is another feature, and I'm stopping with the diagnostic part of my on my speech. With that, there is a new there is a novelty in the space and what we call uncivil society. There is emerging parts of society which stand exactly on the opposite side of the values that we stand for, and they are actually like filling up the space in which we operate. And this is something that we need to acknowledge, and we need to think how we deal with that as well. So this is on the diagnostic side. What we've done so far, you probably know it's a notorious thing that Open Society Foundations went through in-depth transformation, not only in the Western Balkans, but also globally. We did a lot of forecasting, although we didn't have a grim picture in sight when we did the forecasting, when we planned our transformation back then in 2020, 2021. But we were hoping for the best, but we were preparing for the worst. And what we've done is and then I want to share like just a couple of experiences that we have. We've done two major things. First of all, first one is contained in our name as well. It's Open Society Foundations Western Balkans. We didn't have it before. We had national foundations in all Western Balkan countries. We decided to stop inventing wheel in each and every country of the Western Balkans, but to merge resources and try to build a vehicle which will be a regional one and which will take us eventually to the EU. Basically, in short, that's the story. So basically, we have since 2023, we have a single strategy for the Western Balkans. We have single budget for the Western Balkans. We have single staff for the Western Balkans, present in all five. It's not all, in 5 Western Balkan countries. There is currently no office in Montenegro, but there are people who are supporting our work in Montenegro. So this is another one thing that we did, like regionalize and try to be more efficient and cost effective with the funds that we have. Just a recent example, and Enrica will remember, we spoke about that 2 weeks ago. Just an example, one initiative, for example, for the Western Balkan countries to get the observer status in ENISA, in European Agency for Cybersecurity. The paper came from the organization from Kosovo with the support from organization in Bosnia, but the Albanian agency was the first to apply for the status. So this is kind of a short illustration of how we try to work, like to pool the resources and to also support our partners to work regionally. We rarely, if any, project support now which are developed and implemented within the national remits of our countries. And that happens only in cases when we see that one of the countries is lagging behind in certain areas. So then we are ready to support it with a national grant. Otherwise, we support regional grants. That's regionalization, and I know that many of you have partners in the region, and it's not only like the same project implemented in six countries. It's also regional projects with regional and shared knowledge and work as well. We also had to prioritize strategically as well in terms of topics we deal with. When I took over the foundation in Belgrade before the merger into OSF Western Balkans, we had 9 programs then. And we knew that we cannot continue supporting all of these fields, including public health, including education on all levels, and so on and so forth. 9 programs. We basically shredded it to 3. And the first one, and we also tried to be strategic about that, to push where the gains, the return on investment, if you want, is biggest potentially for the region. So the first and biggest priority for us is to push the EU towards the full EU membership. And we try to support wherever we see there is a need to support. We try to support not only civil society, but also governments, the businesses as well, because we increasingly engage with businesses in the region as well. A couple of, only a month ago, like the beginning of September, we started initiative together with Bled School of Management and the Atlantic Council at the Bled Strategic Forum. It's called Future 500, gathering almost 500 businesses from around the region, which have the aim to retain talent in the Balkans, to retain people in the Balkans, and to provide some space for them. But I want to go into detail of that project just to mention one of the areas. The other 2 areas are, of course, just energy transition. So this is another area where we see like the malign dependency that the region has, and that also prevents us from growing and from achieving the goal that we set. And the third one is digital transformation. We see a huge gap, even when you compare the EU developments in the EU and the Western Balkans, even though we know that the EU is not the champion of digitalization, but still there is a huge gap that we need to catch up with the EU in that sense, and we do that. And these 3 programs, that's it, you know. So what we could do for the rest of the programs, we could provide them farewell grants, or like we call it colloquially farewell grants, but basically grants, longer term grants, to have the time and breathing space to transform and to find other sources of funding for their work. I see also, and this is something that makes me also sure that we will survive through this crisis and we will be stronger after this crisis is over, is also moves that I see with other donors, especially private donors. They are increasingly work towards pooling funds together and making like this pool of resources bigger than it is currently, and not basically compartmentalized or divided into smaller chunks. I see many of them providing general support as well. So again, to provide some breathing space and space to think and to experiment, even for the organizations that are working in the field. I see also a very encouraging thing. It's the new EU civil society strategy that we probably all of us participated in consultation. Also, at the workshop that I mentioned 2 weeks ago in Brussels, we had ideation workshop as well with organizations which deal with transport sector. And then I learned from Enrica that 80% of all the IPA that is spent is actually spent in transport policy. Like it's almost 12 billion if I calculate well. Infrastructure, yes, exactly. So if we would have, like, there was one idea shared at that workshop, that if would allocate only 0.001% of that money for the civil society's participation in projects, in planning, to sit at the table, we would have 1.2 million to finance the civil society, and work in that sector where we struggle to find the sufficient capacities, and we would have this ecosystem actually growing based on these funds. So there is still space to expand, and also it's not only important to be at the table when things are discussed, but also, as someone said at that workshop, to be in the kitchen as well when everything is cooked as well, you know. And this is like a new approach that we need to see. This is also my idea of doing more with less, you know, like move from the dining room to kitchen and to check what's in it for us over there. Final thing we do, or not final thing, but one of the things we do actually is, as Welbeck says, extend the domain of struggle. We try to connect as much as possible civil society organizations from the Western Balkans to their peers in the European Union. And we do support a number of large EU organizations, from Bruegel in Brussels to Eliamep in Greece, to bring on board, to bring at the table, or even sneak into the kitchen, our civil society from the Western Balkans, and to become part of that larger area and to participate in that space. I'll stop here. Just one more thing I want to say, and then I'm really stopping and leaving some space also for another round, hopefully. So it's coming from what we define as a political philanthropy. I think that new paradigm of civil society, or this restructured, reshaped civil society, should not shy away from politics as well. We need to be present. We need to be engaged, even though someone said in the comments after the first panel that we consider politics to be dirty, corrupt, this and that. But this is where the decisions are made. So I would also encourage all of us to try involve and deal with that part of our societies and in our countries, in our context. So I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Miodrag, for the presentation, especially for the recommendations and concrete proposals on how to ensure the continuous support to civil society and its engagement in the development of the countries in the Western Balkans. Ms. Jaya, it's a pleasure to have you here with us. And for me personally, being very much involved in the innovative model that the Agency for the Administration of Seized and Confiscated Assets in Albania is implementing and promoting for the social reuse of confiscated assets, which is a model that I'm proud to say that Partners Albania has started, not only in Albania, but in the Western Balkan region. And I have been lucky to manage this initiative and to see during these years how it has evolved and how also the agency is continuing and further promoting this model. So could you please share with the audience how the agency in Albania has developed and operationalized this new innovative scheme, I would say, of support for a civil society organization, which is not actually a supporting scheme, but it is more of collaboration, of cooperation between the agency, the state, and civil society organizations to give back to the community the assets that have been stolen by the criminal activity and anti-corruption also activity. Ms. Jaya will speak in Albanian, so please, the guests, to put your headphones.
Thank you, Claudie. Thank you, Claudie, for the speech. First, even though I'm pretty last to speak in this panel, I believe we have somebody else online as well. So in this panel here physically, sorry. So I think that the area in which I belong to should be given a maximum attention. First, I thank the organizers that made me part of this panel and of this activity, because they are the first ones that really know what type of problems and what type of difficulties do the organizations face in the developing of such activities with such properties and assets. In these last 2 years, into the area of administering seized assets is given an importance from the government, bearing in mind also the engagement that we've had in the reform agenda in order to pass and manage the seized and assets, not only for social use, but also institutional use. Up until now, until a few times, it continues the mentality today. The majority of the society are interested how much confiscated wealth is under the administration of the agency. Nobody is interested of what kind of wealth has been given for social use, and is it given for social use? This is most important to be highlighted, because we have been given an attention only to the symbol that the justice is just acting, but just that. Not only the justice is acting, but also the institutions are open for such wealth, such assets, to put them for a social good. I heard from my friends in the panel that the CSOs have difficulties in acquiring funds. In this case, the NGOs that deal with the area that I deal today have difficulty not only for financing, but they have difficulty also for the use of properties and assets. And this is to be appreciated for those donors and NGOs that have taken the risk and have made possible the implementation of such projects. As well as Dran mentioned, the Ministry of Culture in Albania as well, it is a great supporter of the NGOs for the projects that they have. We lastly, bearing in mind also the interest that the government has to give voice to the area of seized assets, we have given a coordination with the Ministry of Culture that in the projects that they finance, because it is one of the main resources of the Albanian state in the projects that they finance, to have in consideration also for the projects that comes from the organizations that deal with the appropriate area, because it helps them for them to develop and to have the opportunity to carry on. We are trying extremely to this spirit of social use, so the social reuse of seized assets, to spread it in Albania, and not only. And I think that gradually we are making it, but we need to break the myth. And we have assessed, especially this year, and I'm happy to say that within 2024-25, we have 38 decisions of the Institutional Committee for Measures Against Organized Crime, which go wealth and assets for social reuse. And the reuse is not only social, but also institutional. This breaks the myth that these wealth and assets can be used by the third parties, but especially from the first owners who had them first. And at the same time, to break the myth that these assets cannot be used by society. For the first time, we made a call last month where he invited all the organizations, societies and foundations to come and to apply for projects close to our agency. And we have offered them our support with immovable properties. And sometimes the societies want also other assets which serve to society. It could be cars, for example, one of the products that is the most demanded assets. And I'm happy to say that we've had 29 applications from different NGOs, but at the same time, I'm a little bit upset to say that the applications don't require just the confiscated objects, but also funds. The agency has in plan that in continuation to support with funds the civil society, but of course the funds that the agency puts at the disposal are minimalistic and do not create sustainability for later for these NGOs. So I believe that the sustainability for them, it is given from donors. And I'm happy to say that the donors have been awakened from a Latin sleep, not for them, but due to us, our fault. And now they are ready to cooperate with the agency, to cooperate with the public administration for such assets and for the projects that the agency has to implement them. And I ensure you, and I ensure the donors as well, that these projects will have continuation, because it is a policy, as I said, it is a governmental policy for such assets will not be sold anymore. These will be completely under the administration of the agency and of the subjects that have interest to use them. We have many success cases of the reuse of confiscated goods. The first case, as you said it was with Partners Albania, and it was really with great positive impact to have other similars later. We have also cases that are under process, still not finished, and the projects haven't finished, but with a call that we have claimed, at least up to a certain percentage, we will put it to use and we will develop it. As I said, the main axis is the donation, the funds that the NGOs need to have in order to develop such resources. And granting of confiscated assets is not just an honorific case, because through such assets, 5 NGOs create incomes. They might have financial stability, and we have seen that a good part of the projects that we have are projects that generate income in the activities that they do. I can highlight here, and everyone knows now, the project My Tradition, which is allocated in Elbasan. It is a small business who gradually started with less, and today keep themselves without needing extra funds to keep the financial budget. So what I consider as important is we start with less so we can continue later, because the state is just a supporter of such projects. And since it has that support and the sustainability needs to be focused later, that's why the donors needs to be relaxed and to be convinced that their funds will not go to waste, but will be managed and monitored completely from the state until the goal of the project that will be financed to be finalized. The examples of Albania are examples that can be taken in consideration in continuation of the meetings that I've had also with Western Balkan countries, and we have understood that Albania has progressed, even though these are small projects. They have great positive impact. And one of the main supporters are the donors, of course, for such projects. And I find the occasion to thank them here. And at the same time, I tell them not to get tired, to continue to support. It's really beautiful that from an object that is identified with a crime to have a product that is identified with the social use, a product that is identified with social reuse for vulnerable people, for violated women, for children, and for every class of people that need the use of such assets. I would like to close in the end because I don't want to go at length. I appreciate again the participation in this activity. I will be present in every activity that you will be talking about this as CSO, and I'm really happy we talk about CSO and not for crime, even though the assets are seized and have a special status. Thanks to everyone.
Risena, thank you, Risena, for the intervention and for reaffirming your commitment towards social reuse of confiscated assets through the cooperation with civil society organizations. Now, Jonut,
I'm here.
Hi.
Hey, hey.
So, you will bring to us another perspective from a country which is which is a member of the European Union. And when we are speaking about funding, we know that in Romania you have an experience in building a national CSO fund management after the EU accession process. And we thought that this experience would be valuable for the participants in this conference. So could you please share with us some of the lessons learned and some of the recommendations so that we, the countries from the Western Balkans, be prepared for that after we became member of the European Union?
Okay, thank you.
During the
I'll try
process,
to be brief.
Thank you.
I'll try to brief. In order to understand the model after enlargement, I should give you a background of the foundation. So it's called Civil Society Development Foundation, like the Kosovo ones. We've been established in '94 at the initiative of European Commission. The European Commission didn't want to give the money for civil society to the government because the government at that time in Romania, it was very unfriendly towards civil society. So they encouraged civic activists in Romania to build Civil Society Development Foundation. In the very first moment, we've been in charge with the pre-accession money. So we started as a grant-giving organization, but we realized that we missed the research part, the capacity building and advocacy. So we transformed in 1996, after 2 years, in a resource center. And our first client, it was European Commission, and we've been independent in a way that everything was decided by us internally. When we signed when we started the negotiations in 2001, if I recall correctly, then we were obliged to work with the Ministry of Finance because they were doing the payments. So we were deciding the focus, the evaluation, but at the end they were the ones co-signing the contracts and doing the payments because this was the model that the EU has at that time. Since then, so it's 31 years of existence, we put on the table 200 million euros for Romanian civil society. And now till 2032, we have secured about 80 million euros to go for grants, capacity building programs, and so on. How the model works, it's an independent organization, so we don't have any people in our board that consist of non-members that are volunteers, that they have links with political parties or with the government. We are refusing to receive money from the government because we think that it's an issue of independence, and we are not that mature democracy in order to be there. Now, lesson learned. it was a very difficult for us to readjust our model after 2007 when we become a member of the EU. A lot of people thought that that's the end of our mission. We are in, and we should, let's say, rethink our way of working. We've done so by basically running a strategic planning exercise at that moment, and to go into the business sector to make the case for us. We were lucky enough to have a very permissive law for sponsorship and donations. And at the moment, half of our budget of free granting, of grants giving, it's from Romanian business. And in the beginning, it was very difficult to convince them to finance areas of support for civil society that were in the your fundamentals chapters, as it now, human rights, rule of law, anti-discrimination, so on and so forth. They prefer to go with education, help, and social projects. But then it was, a trust building between us and them. We were very patient, and now they are putting resources in our regranting, grant-making programs. And we are also supporting this type of projects. We have the business, and who are the other donors for us is the European Economic Area, so-called Norway grants. For instance, the new member state countries, they receive 10%. This is in the memorandum of understanding between the European Commission and the donor countries. 10% they are going to civil society fund. This time, just started the program. This money are secure from the very beginning by the donors in their let's say mechanism, and they are not going through the memorandum of understanding with the member states. So the member states, they cannot block the civil society fund, and this happened last time in Hungary. Because from the very beginning, the memorandum between the Commission and donors stipulates the fact that it's set aside. So in all of the member state countries, including Portugal, that it's also eligible, the program starts running by selecting of the fund operators. And then is the Swiss cooperation program that Romania and Bulgaria at the moment are the only one having a dedicated support for civil society in their programs. So these are more or less our donors. We are really transparent with any amount that we receive, the type of grants, a summary of each funding that we provide. And the evaluation, because you spoke about evaluation, always we do it with one external, one internal expert. Yeah, this is in a nutshell the model. Now, lesson learned for the European Commission. My colleague, she mentioned the idea of sustainability of civil society organizations, sometimes the lack of sustainability. It's also on our yard, because I'm talking now as an ESC member, the fact that we didn't manage to build in these countries organizations, or to empower local organizations that are like my organization, let's say infrastructure support organization, and do the grant giving. And we were going on this model of contracting, let's say foreign consultancies to do it, because while we have the gaps between one program and the other, always this kind of organization, like it's my organization, we were striving to find resources to build support for the gap years. So this is a lesson learned, and I think we should look also to Poles and other countries that they had this strategy. Another issue, it's the convener role. We were not in a way very visible in the critics about the government, because we knew that the resources are on our let's say, account, but we play the convener role. We play the convener role inside the third sector, between the third sector and the business sector and the trade unions, and between the third sector and the government. So between 2016 2019, we had a very tough government that they want to readjust all the legislation for association and foundation banks on the Hungarian model. And because we played this role and because we were really united as a third sector, nobody betrayed, we succeeded to gain time, and at the end of these 3.5 years to survive with all the legislative setup that we put together in these many years after enlargement and before. Another asset for such an organization is research, and research-based. When a donor, being the European Commission, being OSF, they need data. How many are you? Where are you? How many people are employed? What is your contribution to the GDP? What is the distribution of the third sector regionally and on sectors? So we are always ready to provide this data, because we work with the National Institute for Statistics and with Ministry of Finance on the fiscal data. So this is another infrastructure issue and should be funded within such an organization by the donor, because we do everything on let's say data base, and we build our requests and policies. And of course, my last point here is that you could also bring funding to the third sector on strategic area. And I'll take the example from Albania. So we've done it in 2010. We start to build ANABI, I don't know how to spell it, this agency for recovery of the goods. And from the very beginning, we put there a ceiling of 20% that will go for social, educational, and health projects. So at that moment, we didn't have an agreement about tough issues like rule of law, anti-corruption, and so on. But at least in this part, and it's the governance of this body split between civil society and public servants. And if you read my report from 2022 on the asset recovery and confiscation on the new directive, you will find there my plea towards the European Commission to have a minimum standards and percentage for social use of assets. So this is one example of a project funded by us in strategic areas that are also building different sources for funding for third sector. The other one is individual donations. So in Romania, you have organizations from the social, educational, but also civic sector that they rely almost 100% of donations from citizens. How we have done this? By funding an organization that is doing that is called Association for Community Relations. So they have the deal with the banks. So you could have direct debit, you could have SMS, and they are the ones keeping the infrastructure, negotiating the fees with the TV stations and with the banking system. And a lot of the money, after a scrutiny, a due diligence towards the organization that is registering in this system, is doing, and we have the evidence of how much money are going to that. Another infrastructure type of project for the third sector, it's the sponsorship law. That is the only country we have it in Romania, and a lot of people, they say it's old and it's not transparent and so on. But this was the deal we had it with the state. We said, okay, the state, you don't want to fund the civil society, you want to fund it because its annual budget will end up with project of 3 or 4 months that are contracted in September, and you should report and finalize the project in December. So basically, those are the money from the state that are allowed, if a company has a profit, to direct a percentage of it through the sponsorship mechanism for an NGO project. And the last one is the individual that could direct 3.5% from their taxes towards a social NGO or less percentage for civic NGOs. And this, we succeeded to defend it towards those years. And that's why it's important, our convening role. That's why it's important, the solidarity in the third sector. And the last one is the community foundations. That is not our initiative. It was supported by Charles Duarmont. Romania has now 16 community foundations that they are doing the role we are doing at the central level at the county level. And they are raising money from citizens and from private donors and from us. We are also supporting them. But it's the citizens and the members that decide what kind of projects the money that they raised are going to. So yeah, this is lesson learned. This is our models, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jonas. Okay, we have a few time left, so I would like to open the floor for questions. Yes, Anna.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anna Mulani, and I represent a youth organization here in Albania. I wanted to ask Ms. Kjelsa a question. Well, it was very interesting and insightful, the presentation you did regarding the support provided for civil society in Western Balkans. Also was particularly interesting how these funds respond to priorities in the region for the civil society. Well, my question is, could you please share whether there are some available statistics regarding the awarded funds to international NGOs compared to local national NGOs in the Western Balkans? Thank you.
Okay, maybe another one. Yes, please.
Thank you. It was very insightful and for me always very, sorry, Petar Knežević, Montenegro from Center for Development of NGOs. Always interesting to talk about funding and the ways that we can formulate this this theme. And for me, the new thing or the thing that's emerging as well in Montenegro is core grants or institutional grants. And we are currently seeing the first one given in Montenegro by the government. I don't think they did it on purpose. They maybe did it on accident, but it's working really well for now. They just published the call and they're choosing the grantees for now. So we'll see how it goes. For me, one of the most important things that concerns me in that process is the capacity of the grant maker. What you also mentioned, even with regular action grants, you have this lack of capacities by the governments often to distribute those grants in a meaningful way and to structure them and to distribute them. Do you see that challenge if we move towards the core grants with from public funds or even from private funds which did not manage core grants previously? And do you think we should anticipate that challenge, that those grants could probably run into issues not being adjusted to the realities and just being maybe copied from other calls? And anybody can answer if you can. I would personally like Dren's insights because I love his insights always. So I think he has something important to say. Thank you.
We may continue with the response. Dren, yeah, you can continue and then.
Thank you, Petar, for putting this pressure on me. Actually, you raised one of the most important parts of this entire public funding cycle. It is the most important part that capacities of public officials are adequate to the mechanisms or procedures for grant giving. Here I will just share with you an example of a case where it was completely unintentional by the institutions, the way how they ended up giving grants. There is one office within the Prime Minister's office that is responsible for ethnic minorities in Kosovo, and they are one of the grant givers. So their intention and idea was to support ethnic minority organizations in Kosovo Serbian, Bosniak, Turkish, Roma, Ashkali, Egyptians, like all these communities. But then they used a completely general criteria and open call that in nowhere in there you would target these organizations. The second layer of the problem is that we do not have like ethnically based NGOs in Kosovo. Even if you want to, what would you call, for example, a Serbian NGO or a Turkish NGO or a Bosniak NGO? So that is why you have to relate it to the beneficiaries, to the target groups that you want to support. If you want to support a certain community group, then in the criteria, it is so detailed, but then it tells a lot on the intention and the knowledge that you have on how to operationalize it. And if you don't have such a legal category of Albanian, Serbian, and other ethnic minorities NGOs, you will end up in a complete messy situation. So at the end, everyone got funding from that call, but the ethnic minority organizations. And this tells us a lot of lessons here. Other organizations have more developed capacities. They know better how to write grants, so they're more privileged probably. So that's why they were better positioned to respond to that call. Had the institution had the knowledge and this understanding that I'm sharing here with you, they could have come up with a call and criteria that would respond to the main intention that they had. It is complex and difficult, and that is why we think that it should be very well thought, and everyone should be included into this dialogue and be planned, like it should be scaled and in a progressive manner, and institution by institution, and especially jointly with civil society organizations. In every country in the Western Balkans, there are well-capacitated, very high experienced organizations who could help institutions either jointly manage both or completely independent, be managed by civil society organizations. Miki mentioned pooling funds of donors. That should be, I think, the future of all donors. Right now at KCSF, we are managing a pool fund mechanism that brings together several donors. Currently, SIDA and Swiss through SDC, but previously Luxembourg used to be part of it. They all pool funds into a joint long-term program that allows then you to support organizations in long term and have adequate instruments for all types of NGOs, be that well-established, be that an individual activist or a newly formed organization. So public funding should also aim to either jointly with other existing donors or in collaboration with civil society organization, initiate these like testing phases of distributing public funding in a better way.
Thank you, Dren. Before we go to the first question, is someone else wanting to provide a response?
I could say something on it.
Okay.
Okay, so for the
sorry, you're not. Yeah.
Yes, for the funds that are, let's say, with public roots like European Economic Area and Swiss, we have three types of approach for the core grants or organizational grants. First is that we allow them to have 20% in their budget to be used for this, let's say, organizational development, we call it. The second instrument is for umbrella organization, federation, platform, coalitions being registered or informal, where the grants that we are now providing are core grants, support grants for them. And the third instrument that we have, it's for small size organization and medium-sized organizations that we work with them on a process to build their capacity by teaching them how to run a strategic exercise. So we help them doing the strategy. If we evaluate the strategy and operational plan that is doable, they receive grants in order to implement the strategy, and sometimes we ask them to report just with the annual report, so we don't need any other reporting. But this is mostly on the grants that we receive support from the private donors, because with small organization it's much more easy to work with private money than with money that have, let's say, public roots. And for that, and I will close with that, we have a platform that is called Creștem ONG. It will be translated Raise NGOs. We worked on this metrics for capacity building with organizations from Slovenia, I think, and Slovakia many years ago. It was a printed matrix, now it's online. And basically, any funding that we start for an organization, we ask them first to go through the matrix, and we provide them a mentor to go to all the process in order to have after it an exact needs and state of the development of the organization and the way forward on developing their strategy during the implementation of the program, being the 20% allocation, being the federation and the umbrella organization, or the small organizations. And if you want to look on this tool, I'll be happy to provide you with the link and translation of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Ms. Chiesa.
So yes, we have data on, well, we work with some, I have to say, very few international organizations. We work quite a lot through call for proposals. Therefore, we target different type of NGOs, in particular small NGOs, because of the call for proposal on average, the support that we give to NGOs is about €1 million over 2/3 years. And then, of course, we work with some multi-governmental institutions, like, for example, the Western Balkans Fund. But we always have as, let's say, condition that they have to sub-grant. Okay. We also have statistics on which NGOs we are working with, which sector covered per country, etc. So more than statistic, we collected the data, and we have a quite thorough analysis on that. It's also the first time that I receive there is possibly a perception that we work quite a lot with international organizations, so I can give you the reality as far as relates to the regional support. That is what is falls under my responsibility. So under regional support, we had during this programming period only one program with an international organization, that is UNDP. And this is the program is Reload. You may know that. So they also launch a call for proposals, and the rest are call for proposals with a number of quite small NGOs that can apply to the calls, and that they are benefiting from the support of the European Commission, and in particular the IPA funds. So it's a bit. It's not the first time that we receive this question. Actually, I mentioned the assessment that we have been doing through Reload, through Taxo. And if you go to the report, there is a specific session that is dedicated to that, and that gives a concrete reply and answers. And on top of that, we have also a database that we have started building for data protection issues. We cannot put it on a website, the database, but it's where we keep track of all the not only beneficiary but also sub-granted NGOs that benefit from EU funds directly or indirectly.
Thank you. Any last one? Yes, Diana, and I think we will close here.
Diana, Bosnia and Herzegovina. I'm happy that you mentioned load or reload methodology. That's a perfect example how they destroyed public funding in Bosnia and Herzegovina that Ken mentioned. They stole local ownership. They teach the government how to avoid own procedure and to pretending to be transparent. But my question is, since the panel is dedicated to the future of the funding, and we are still dancing on an already known area. So I'm wondering, could we suggest something completely innovative? Sometimes when I discuss with Ran about their methodology to defending the idea in front of public, for me it was too scary at the beginning. But after that, the methodology is at least different and expose civil society organization to publicly defend the approaches. And for me, the largest problem, because we also had own regranting mechanism and we distributed 70 million euros in the name of the Norwegians. And we realized that civil society is not well informed what core grant is and how to use it. We are experts in implementing activities, but not doing our job. And we are experts in administrative work, but not in innovative approaches to solve the problems. So we need to think how to motivate people with a re-granting mechanism to be more innovative, to try some crazy ideas. I'm not calling for a violence, but something completely different out of the box, because conferences, nice talks, publications doesn't functioning. So we need to think something completely different. I'm not sure what is that, but maybe to force government to do something differently in terms of the funding, and also to think about deleting UN and similar agency for all forms of re-granting, because that is the good recipe to destroy civil society, democracy, and development in the Western Balkan region.
Thank you, Diana, for the intervention. Okay, Shuki, the last one.
Okay, it's very similar what I'm going to say, but I just wish to clarify that there is a need for fair distribution of fundings, because it happened all the time, all these years or through the decades, that some of the civil society organizations known as, let's say, darling organizations for donors, they receive all the time fundings, and the circle of receiving is not ending. There is no way how to stop that happening. Why not changing the policy? I'm not saying that they shouldn't receive, but there are other organizations that are well established, solid organizations, ready and keen to contribute, but never happen to receive the donation from these donors. There is perceived as a clientele of the donors. Donors give to the same organizations all the time fundings. So what to do with this phenomenon? How to change this phenomenon? How to approach? What conditions to apply so that this is not going to happen all the time? Thank you.
Thank you, Shuki. I don't know if There is any, okay, okay. Yeah, there were some. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you to all the speakers for your valuable contribution and insights. So I will leave the floor to Biljana to close the conference. Yes? The panel or all the participants? Oh, the panel. Before we give Biljana come to the podium, let's make a picture all together.
Okay, am I on? Yes. I have the incredible task to wrap up and summarize the key takeaways and recommendations for this incredible discussion today, which I really hope you enjoyed as much as I did personally. I think the first session was loaded with so much relevant information on what was going on, what is currently going on. And a few things popped up in the first one. The shrinking of civic space was the most obvious one by far. And the discussion rolled from shrinking civic space to our region, to the challenges in the EU, and how we actually have to make use of the spaces and the importance of EU advocacy. Key things that were mentioned that we should keep an eye on and why does it matter was the EU civil society strategy. It is relevant for our countries as well because it will set the standard in the EU for clear standards, for clear benchmark, for something that we deeply care about having a resilient civil society in our region. The other one is the multi-annual financial framework. This is an opportunity for all of us to be engaged, to contribute because sustaining funding, having funding for supporting civil society, civic space, enabling environment might not be given as we think, despite the positive encouragement. And we've seen some both positive and threatening news coming from the EU. The second panel was a very interesting one, and I personally very much enjoyed because it sparked a very lively discussion between government and the civil society representatives. And you can see, actually, for me, it was very interesting because you can see quite some difference of opinions depending on who is perceiving their role how. And for me, the key takeaway was the lack of trust, I think. So the pertaining argument was that there is trust on both sides about the intentions, about who is standing from where and what is their expected role to be. And I think for the forthcoming period, trust building between the institutions where it is possible, unfortunately in some of our countries, at the moment is not possible. I'm echoing Serbia here. But in the rest of the countries, this is trust building between the institutions is very much needed. Then there was the point about the united voice of the civil society. And this is particularly important as we had a very lively discussion, and it comes up from donors or from the institutions occasionally as well, not only from government representatives. And I like how this role was clarified, that it's not up to the civil society to have a united voice, but it is recommended that we have a consolidated position on key important things that are crucial for our future. And the last panel, thank you very much to the table over there and the table over here. I really enjoyed this discussion, and I really hope we provided some perspectives in reforming funding systems for ensuring the sustainability and the survival actually of the civil society in our region. having in mind the huge challenges that are in front of us in terms of ensuring the financial viability. And I like how the panel discussed very different points of observations for using recovery assets, to the Romanian model, to the need to think through the enlargement process and the money available there actually to fund civil society. So there I saw a clear echo that in these times and this pressure to do much more with less amidst the huge democratic challenges that are in front of us, there is a very strong call to reforming funding modalities. So I hope we learned as a civil society something that now is a time to advocate for changing funding models, to rethink our approaches, and also on the donors, especially on bilaterals, the EU institutions, to think of more innovative ways how they can support the civil society resilience and sustaining our commitment to defending democracy and the core democratic values. I'm very careful not to say European values. They're not European, they're universal. So let's rethink the way that we support the civil society financial viability through the new models. So I managed to do it in a very short time, I hope. So don't take a longer time of you. Thank you so much to the speakers, to Partner Slovenia, again, our member here, and to the donors as well for enabling this discussion to happen. I think the point that I missed on saying was we realized in this time of constraints that this exchange is now becoming one more meaningful. And the exchange on a regional level, the exchange between the region and the EU, and it's something that we shouldn't take for granted as we used to, I think. So yes, there is it. Have a lovely day, everyone. Picture, mine. Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Group, family photo.
Thank you, everybody. To conclude, let's make a group photo all together. Thank you again for the very participatory process.